the slogan "Idea with Her" really resonates. The idea is to align with women and girls that are facing violence and put yourself in their shoes, kind of by, as the name suggests, being with them, standing with them and aligning with them. Because in the past we have had the normal thing to do is that people keep quiet and they don't talk about cases of violence. But now we're encouraging people to come out and speak out and talk. And of course, when somebody talks about the issues, instead of making that person to be embarrassed about the situation they are in, you stand with that person and you stay with that person. So
So is this better? Can I be heard and seen?
About violence against women and girls.
Can I be heard and seen?
Yes, loud and clear, Kemi. My guest is already asking if she can be heard and seen. So I'll just quickly introduce why we're here today. First of all, I applaud all the eyes that are watching this now, live. And even if you don't catch this live, the good thing is on our YouTube page, you can catch all the conversations. This is the 6th in the series of the hashtag Idea with Her campaign, which is along the worldwide campaign to end gender-based violence with a special focus on women and girls. Around the world is hashtag I am with her. Like Hadiza said, the whole idea is to get people to speak up more. And I have been in this social development space for so long as a reporter and a journalist. And yet every time I hear something about girls or women that have been abused, I think I've heard the worst, but I've seen awful things. Even through this show, we found out all kinds of, I'm saying and seeing things I ordinarily wouldn't see. Who would have thought a child isn't even safe with a female nanny? A female nanny that was making her ward give her oral sex. It's crazy. And finding out that even in religious places, we know that children are not safe, girls are not safe. Whether it's in the religious space, whether it's even in your home. We've dealt with 5 different people who have talked about being abused, who have talked about what parents should be doing, what the school should be doing. Today, I'm speaking to 2 people who are very big on advocacy. One of them is Dr. Kemi DaSilva-Ibru. She is passionate. If anything, I'd say that the passion for women's voices has made her, she's now studying for a graduate certification in gender-based violence. It's somebody who is a gynecologist, who has also gone to study all kinds of things that will make her work easier. She is a founder of WARIF, Women at Risk Foundation. It was through WARIF that I met the young woman who we are having in the house with us today. Her name is Brenda, and I'll spell her name U-P-H-O-P-H-O. Now, if you can say the ho, ho, ho of Father Christmas, that's how she taught me, then you can sound her name. It's ooh, ho, ho. So it's so nice to see you, Brenda. Brenda.
Thank you.
Yes, I'd rather that Brenda opens by telling me the journey to her work. I don't even want to waste my time describing what Brenda did. But I do know that the first time I ever saw Brenda was on social media crying her eyes out when she came out, and this video went viral. Now, this is a very accomplished woman in the arts and entertainment sector, coming out to speak about having been abused severally. And it was so heartrending. So I would like to start from there, because sometimes people think we're talking too much when we say this is an issue that we must focus on. For someone looking as lovely as you to say you have survived it. In fact, you guys are the ones that told me, stop using the word victim. Use the word survivor. So it's my pleasure to welcome you. So introduce to me the work that you do, why you do it, and what led you there. So Kemi, we'll be back with you in a short while. Let's go with Brenda first.
Thank you so much, and I'm really pleased to be here. Thank you for having me on. This is something that I put up a post today, and I said that I'm never going to stop talking about it. I'm never. This is my life's work now. And how I started really was, I'd been producing theater for a few years, and I came across some material that really, really resonated with me. I felt so it was like I was re-traumatized without sounding like I'm just carrying around all this trauma. The material spoke to me, and it was basically about a young girl who was being abused by a benefactor. And I decided that we were going to put up the play. I spoke to my partner and I was like, this is important and I want us to work on it. And so we built a whole campaign around it called Break the Silence.
Yeah.
And we expanded the material and we put it up. We first put it up at Eco Hotel, then we put it up at Terra Culture, you know, and that's actually how I met Dr. K, you know, when I started doing that work. And she was able to make me understand that I still needed some help because it hurt. But the wonderful, wonderful thing about it was I didn't expect the response I got. So immediately after the play, usually what I would do is have a session with the audience members, even though I didn't know them from anywhere. I would open up and tell them about my story, my survival story, and kind of ask them to ask us questions. And at the time in the room, we would have invited like a counselor or a psychologist, just so that if people needed help after, you know, they would have somebody to talk to, somebody more professional and all. And it was amazing. In a room full of strangers across 8 shows that happened over a period of 1 month, people that didn't know each other were standing up and telling their truth, you know. And
tell me, what kind of statistics, you know, what did you find out from that short thing? You're taking place around the city. You're talking about people breaking the silence about violence. You're using the example of one girl and you're sharing your experience. What did that open for you? Was it a can of worms?
Yes. So, but it wasn't really a can of worms for me, because even though I hadn't been doing a lot of work in the advocacy space, just talking to my friends and my peers, everybody had a story of survival, of different, varying degrees of assault. You know, it was almost normal, almost, you know. So what happened, what was beautiful the most was that there were people who were suffering the effects of the assault on the survivor. So there was a guy who was married to a survivor who they hadn't had intimate relations for 7 years of their marriage.
Wow.
Yes, and he said it openly, publicly, you know. And even for him, I was like, look, you need to talk to this counselor. Even if this is not the person you're going to end up talking to, at least start some process. You know, you guys need to have a conversation. And he was like, this was the first time he was able to understand why his wife was like that.
Wow.
You know, even for the play itself, 3 of the participants were survivors out of 4. Out of 4 women that were participants in the production, 3 of them were survivors. So it was very stark. And then I also met people who had never had any experience of gender-based violence, sexual assault, any of those things. So it was like they were taken aback. They were taken aback by it and by the facts and the statistics that I was sharing at the time.
Mm-hmm. So at this point, I would like to bring Dr. Kemi in. Dr. Kemi is an ONG, that's a gynecologist, and she's worked in that space. And if I remember correctly, one of the things you told me, Dr. Kemi, was the fact that just seeing the kind of ignorance that existed in that sector, even though WARIF was not the first organization to start the advocacy, but you realized that there was still a gap. Am I correct, Dr. Kemi? Dr. K, like they call you.
Absolutely. Absolutely. First, I'd like to thank you for having me here this evening. Thank you so much for having me here this evening. And I'm going to jump straight in and talk about that lack of awareness, as you put it, that ignorance, if you will. Working in this space, I've been a gynecologist for 20 years now, and I've been working in the social justice and advocacy space against violence against women, girls, and children. And this is why we actually established the organization WARIF to address this issue. And fundamentally, in my opinion, the primary reason why we have this issue is that lack of awareness, if you will. We're working in an environment in Nigeria where we have 200 million people, half of us are women, 1 in 4 of our girls before age 18 would experience a violent encounter. 1 in 14 women between ages 15 and 49 would also experience a violent encounter. And we're in 2021. So we have to ask ourselves and look inwards and wonder why. We have, all of us, all the actors have a role to play. And unfortunately, all the actors are culpable. We have women that, yes, have little or no understanding, except in their hearts that what's happening is wrong. Because we're living in an environment where there's a patriarchy. We're living in an environment where culturally it's acceptable.
I'm sure we're going to get Dr. Kemi back on. You know, we've lost her. But those kind of statistics that she's quoting are kind of scary. And while she's trying to log back on, do you accept, Brenda, that patriarchy is the problem? Is that why women are not speaking up more?
It's a factor. You know, it's a factor because, you know, when you think about the fact that women are seen as possessions, you understand?
Are we still seeing women as possessions still today? Isn't that a surprise?
Yes.
Or are women seeing themselves as possessions?
Well, it's multi-pronged. You know, you have two sides to it. There's conditioning. Don't forget that we live in a very cultural and very religious society. And, you know, based on culture,
is that bad?
Not really. You know, I'm talking about the extremes now, you know, but in a sense, you have a lot of people who have described women as the weaker vessel, as things to be owned. You are mine, a bride price to be paid, you know, and I'm not saying that those practices are bad. It just reinforces some of the thoughts around women being possessions, women being created just for men, women being things to be owned, acquired. You understand? And that's really the fundamental root of it, you know, where you are not seen as just an individual, a human being. You're seen as something to be possessed, something to be owned, something to be bought.
Tell me, Brenda, you're married.
Yes.
Did your husband pay bride price?
Yes, he did.
Does he treat you as a possession?
No, he doesn't.
So why is he different? Why don't you have many more men like that? Is that what the issue is, really? Tell me why yours is different. Did you have to educate him?
No, I didn't. But my husband is a liberal, in my opinion. He's a liberal. You know, he's an artist. He just has a different mindset. So I don't know what it is like for other people. You understand? I don't know what it is like for other people, because this is the long-term relationship I've ever had. So I don't know what it means to be in a dynamic where people don't give you the opportunity to be yourself. You know, but of course I read about it, I hear about it, and then you have, you know, you can have an altercation with a man on the road where you're driving, and he says it's not your fault that there's somebody that gave you a car, or it's not your fault I have somebody like you at home. You know, that's utter disrespect. That denigration, that thing that makes you look like a woman as just less than, just a little bit less than you. You know, and it's reinforced. It's reinforced by not allowing women have the same opportunities as men, where people can see them and say, oh, this is a strong person. It's not just a strong woman. She's a strong person. She's a strong individual. She's an accomplished individual, not accomplished for a woman. Accomplished for, you know, that little caveat that they add to it. And those things matter. They're very silent, very salient, but they're insidious. They make a difference in the mindset. You know, the way they treat boys and girls. We've been dealing with that for a long time. How the boys prefer to go to school, how you prefer to send, because after all, the girl is just going to get married and go with another man and all of that. You know, so religion and culture, they play a role.
So how can advocacy change that? Because if you ask me, since Beijing 1995, we've been calling for women's empowerment. We've been talking. There's a seed up. Document out that we should sign. All of these things are there, and then we keep hearing stories. Do you remember the story that came out last week of the young lady who was going for a job interview, supposed job interview,
yes,
only to be raped and killed?
Yes.
So what is it that we're doing wrong, that things like this still happen? I don't understand it.
So this is how I see it personally. I see it's a crime, and I think that that classification of criminality needs to really be emphasized, because when somebody gets robbed, you can go to the police, it's a crime. The police won't ask you any stupid questions. They will tell you, you were robbed, where? Describe the person, all those kinds of things. But when it comes to assault, they start asking you, what did you wear? Why did you go there? Look at the time, all sorts of things. So first of all, we need to emphasize the criminality of the act. It needs to be re-emphasized and reinforced, and we ensure that people get the appropriate punishment for it. Because the more you say this is a criminal act, it stops being emotional. It stops being it's only sex, or it's just, no. You violated a person, that's what it is. And it's a criminal act. And it needs to be added to the communication. Rape is a crime. Assault is a crime. Gender-based violence is a crime. You need to say it. You need to add it to all the communication. People need to understand that, if you assault somebody, you go to jail for 14 years. It's the way they were carrying on about all the other things and telling us this is the jail term for this and this is the jail term for that. Tell everybody what the jail term is. Let them know. Because a lot of women will feel empowered. Yeah. They will know that at least the law is backing me. You understand? So that's the first thing. We need to recognize the criminality of the act. It is a crime.
That's a nice way to go. I don't know if you saw also, the thing about social media these days and technology is that all kinds of stories fly around. I was reading the other day about a woman who had devised a condom that has teeth, a female condom that has teeth. So how do you think that can work? Because does it mean that we now take responsibility for I think personally that because we haven't been able to address the problem, many more women need to take responsibility for their own safety. Sadly, I don't know if Kemi heard that. Kemi, did you hear what I just said? Yeah, that
I did.
Sadly,
absolutely.
I just feel that, for example, if you're going out, it's crazy. You have to double check, tell 3-4 people, make sure that 10 people are following you. It just being a female in this country seems so unsafe. What do you think, Kemi?
I absolutely agree. I think beyond just this country, being a woman anywhere, one feels absolutely unsafe. And it's a function of so many reasons. But fundamentally, for us to start changing the narrative of us women so we can begin to feel safe, we have to put in the work. And it's not just an individual. It's not just each of us checking on each other, each of us ensuring that when we leave the house, we have our pepper spray with us, making sure our friends are aware. But also, the onus is on the community. The onus is on organizations like WARIF. The onus is on governments to play their part to ensure that women are safe. When we look at Nigeria, for example, and you ask, well, what's being done, for instance, we always start with justice, because every woman deserves the right to have and seek justice. But then we look at our laws. We talk about the Child's Rights Act. Only 25 states of the 36 have domesticated it. We talk about our amended rape laws. Everyone's heard of this VAP Act, where we talk about expanding all the various forms of gender-based violence in the law. But only 23 states have domesticated it. We talk about health and making sure that when women sadly do have these encounters, they have places like the WARIF Rape Crisis Center. But that's one center in Lagos of 20 million, and we only have 30 across only 17 states of our 36. So there has to be a coordination of all these public services at DaSilva: health, justice, law enforcement, social welfare, to make sure that everyone feels safe in our environment.
Okay, now I want to stay with you and take on the issue of advocacy and the challenges to advocacy. When I started with you earlier, I said, even though Word had started on this issue years before, there was still that gap that you saw. And it appears that even with what you're doing, there's still a whole lot to be done. So what is making advocacy so difficult? People are not putting money where their mouth is, or what?
Well, I mean, when we talk about advocacy, I mean, well, advocacy is an idea, it's a cause. And then when I say social advocacy, I'm trying to get that idea into the society so that the society defends and upholds that idea. In this particular example, we're talking about the rights of women. We're talking about the protection of women and girls. When I started in the space, as I'd mentioned earlier, I'm so sorry, I had a bit of technical issues when we first started. I was saying that I've been working as a gynecologist for 20 years. And I've been working in this space with women for that long. And recognizing that this is a systemic problem, recognizing that it's beyond one individual and certainly beyond her, was why an organization like mine was established. So we work entirely survivor-centered. And so it's the health, education, and community service. And we can't do it alone, you're absolutely right. It has to be a collaborative effort. There has to be coordination between the private sector and the public sector. And we all have to recognize that we can't do it in silos. And a lot of times, unfortunately, what tends to happen is we keep reinventing the wheel, each and every one of us, with good intentions, as opposed to coming together in a concerted effort and successfully tackling the problem.
Clearly, I think that's the one you're working with, Brenda, and most of the survivors that you have. Is that what's happening, Brenda? You are collaborating to get this, you're collaborating to get this across.
Yes, we've worked so well together. We've done so much, and I'm so glad, because for a very long time I didn't know what to do. I didn't know what to do outside of knowing that as an artist I can put, my message into the art form. Even that didn't come to me early. You understand? But, when I met with Dr. Kemi and she started with the center, it just seemed perfect. Like, this is somebody who is even medically qualified, who understands the physiology of a woman, who understands what it means for a woman to be traumatized, and then, she's using her network and her access to try and put something together just for young women, for girls everywhere. So it was just easy to channel. It was just easy for me to channel, and be very inspired, to be honest, by the kind of work that they're doing at WARIF. And I also received a lot of counseling, a lot of help, even though the incidents had happened to me years prior. You understand? That was something that I was able to gain, to, unwrap some of the trauma.
You thought you had healed. This happened when you were how old?
So I had 3 incidents at 7, at 18, and at 22.
3 different people.
Yes.
So now you walked into that, even though you had survived 1, 2, 3. So by the 3rd time, what did you do to yourself? I said, man, I ain't doing this no more.
I just said, okay, this is my life. This is my life. I'm the one attracting them. I'm the one calling them.
If I may, Brenda's journey is one that fills one with just so much pride because she's such a strong woman. I mean, I'm privileged to know her both personally and professionally, and I can see this dynamic individual that just shines through in spite of. It's very important that I reiterate that this was not Brenda's fault at 5, at 20, at 30. This is not any woman's fault. Women that sadly already have been socialized and have been victimized, and I don't use that word often because they're not victims, they're survivors, but there's no terminology to describe what a survivor has been through except for this word that I hate. But women that have pushed through and successfully at that, there is a radar that men, predators, identify. It's that young girl or young woman that has no self-esteem. It's that young girl or young woman that already feels like an outsider because society has never been there for her. And in spite of the fact that she has been able to push through herself, she still doesn't have an enabling environment that validates that for her. So unfortunately, again and again, this groomer when you're a child and this manipulative man, this narcissist when you're an adult, identifies you. And so this is why it appears as though when you're listening to a narrative like Brenda's, you wonder, well, why again and again and again? And the sad truth is she's actually one of the stronger ones because it's happening to her in spite of. And still she pushes through each and every time.
So tell me though, I'm going to take a very short break, but I want to see a little bit of the pieces of work that you do and the pledges that we've come up with to help parents and children pledge to sharing all information about protection of the child, especially the girl child. You eventually, Dr. Kemi, tell me at some point in time that in the course of your work, you realize that you still had to bring boys onto the platform, try to educate boys, because it seems like we've been talking to women, we haven't talked to boys. So a campaign like Being With Her is also talking to the boys to understand.
Absolutely. You cannot have a conversation about the rights of women, the protection of women, without including boys and men in the conversation. Boys and men are survivors themselves, and boys and men are the potential perpetrators. So for all the many reasons that you expend time and energy protecting that girl, he's also being socialized as a young boy in the same home that's violent. Those intergenerational cycles that are happening with her is also happening with him. So if we don't change his narrative, he will grow up to become a perpetrator, because unfortunately, the odds are stacked against him. So this is why we started the Boys Conversation Cafe, which is an education program, secondary school program for boys between 12 and 18.
What kind of things did that change? What kind of things did that bring out to you? What kind of information did that provide you?
The very first thing that we recognized was the sheer magnitude of this mindset. We sent out a questionnaire, 1,200 questionnaires to boys anonymously, asking them, what would you do if you see a girl being raped? 1 in 5 boys came back saying, we would walk away. These are young boys between 12 and 18. And when you ask them to list the reasons why, they gave examples like, I wasn't part of the plan, so it wasn't my turn to go in there. They gave examples like, I don't know her, so why should I help her? And then of course, the stereotypic, maybe it was what she was wearing. Maybe she had a reputation in school. This is why she was attacked. So this is what we see. And this is the mindset that young boys have. And this is what we have pledged to change with the Boys Conversation Cafes.
I heard Brenda going, wow, wow, wow. Do you have a son yourself?
Yes.
So what are you teaching him? What is it teaching you?
My son, he even knows not to yell at girls. He knows. He knows not to yell at them. He knows that if he sees a girl being yelled at, he should stand up and say, don't do that. He knows that now, you know. And I just want to say that even though I knew I wanted to tell a story, I didn't know the effect I wanted to have until I met Dr. Kemi. You know, I didn't know that I needed to talk to boys as well. I didn't know that. You know, all the while I've always just preached hypervigilance, or always make sure you tell people where you're going, or don't go to this place, don't go to that place, you know. It never occurred to me to say, look, this thing is not your fault. It is not about what you wore. It is really about the mindset of this person, you know, and that's the work we should be doing. You understand? Which was one of the reasons why Women in the Arts started, because I wanted to just highlight strong women. I wanted
That's your advocacy group.
Yes, yes. You understand? I just wanted to highlight women and make people understand that these are individuals that do everything that men do.
Absolutely.
So they're not just, they're not just girls.
And using art as
I wanted to get to see a little bit of Brenda's work. I just wanted to ask Dr. Kemi to quickly respond. Brenda had said earlier that one of the ways to check this, if we really want to day with her, we should criminalize rape, give it a different picture and be less emotional about it.
Well, the truth is, rape is a criminal offense. Rape is already criminalized. Rape by its very definition is a legal definition. When you ask anybody what is rape, it has to be penetrative sex. It has to be the use of somebody's anatomy in the orifice of another, or the use of an inanimate object in the orifice of another. It's a legal definition that involves and includes without consent, and then of course, provided you're not a minor. Because once you're a minor, then clearly the act in itself is illegal. We have laws that tell us that if you're successful in conviction, it's life imprisonment. So already we have in place our laws. They were antiquated. We amended them. We had the VAP Act. We've been trying to domesticate that across all the states. We've expanded the definition to include men. We didn't have men before. To include gang rape. We didn't have that. To include the various forms of gender-based violence, because it's beyond just rape and sexual assault. We have female genital mutilation. We have early child marriages, and so on. So we are doing the legal, if you will. Now it's time to implement the legal.
Okay. So I'll take a short break. And if technical is ready, I need to play a little bit from Women in the Arts. And then after that, we'll come back and speak for a few minutes and then show pictures of what Dr. K has successfully. I mean, you're not a lawyer as well, a gender-based activist. It's consumed your entire being.
It really has. It really has. And it has to end. And with platforms like this, conversations being had here, hopefully continuing in rooms after they listen to conversations like this, we're definitely going to make strides in the right direction.
I was just wondering, can you tell me briefly what that was about, Brenda?
So basically, it was about this girl who tried to kill herself, you know, and the whole play was really about to find out what happened. Why did she try to do this? And that was the opening scene. Her mother was a little bit, not a little bit, her mother was very harsh, and you know, and the girl attempted suicide, and we spent the whole play trying to examine. So she invites her pastor, who was the guy that was trying to do the deliverance, you know, she invites her friend, she calls her the girl's friend, you understand? So eventually, you know, on the bed, that scene on the bed is where the girl is trying to confess to say, actually, you know, uncle raped me.
And who was uncle? Is that mommy's brother or?
It was mommy's, it was her late father's friend, who was their benefactor since her father had died, who was helping her.
So usually the benefactor is somebody who has an overhand. And was this story inspired by a particular story?
It's a bit of a common story. It's a bit of a common story where your benefactor decides that he owns you and wants to take advantage. It's a bit of a common story. Yeah.
So that brings, I would like Dr. Ibru to speak to that. I know that abuse happens to boys as well, but clearly we all know that the biggest victimized ones are female. And this usually is because they are weaker. And again, this patriarchy. But could it also be because the women themselves are not doing enough as mothers to protect their daughters?
I mean, that's an interesting point that you've raised, DaSilva, parenting, and parenting in the African context. And I say that because our culture is rich, and it comes with so many positive, strong, meaningful, you know, lessons that we pass on to our children. But unfortunately, our culture is also damaging because it also has the harmful effects, especially when it comes to women, and when we look through the lens of a girl being brought up in Nigeria. Girls are brought up as the weaker sex. Girls are brought up to be quiet, to smile, and to prepare herself for marriage. Girls are taught that boys are more important, either with body cues, with non-verbal actions, like wait for your brother before you start your meal. It's okay for him to go and play football, but you have to stay back and wash up. And boys are brought up entitled. And so what happens in an environment like that is, as the child grows and starts to recognize that, oh, everyone around me that's male gets special treatment, and everyone around me that's male is allowed to get away with X, Y, and Z. And then you throw in the violence, because these are usually violent environments and homes. And so again, this child is trying to understand, and this is a young boy that did not start off being violent, but he's looking around, already entitled, appreciating that his father, his caregiver, and those around him are getting away with all acts and with impunity. And the women are quiet and allowing it to happen. He is going to grow up and repeat the cycle. And this is what we get.
Mm-hmm. I just wondered though, Brenda, do you think there's something about the mother that makes her unable to see the danger in that kind of behavior for it to still be happening in our society today? Even though we are middle class to upper middle class, I'm sure this thing goes all the way down to the grassroots. Brenda, do you think there's something that's making us that way?
It's just conditioning, social conditioning. You know, you repeat what you've seen, how you were treated, you treat your children that way until you consciously decide to break that cycle. You know, so that's what I see. It's social conditioning more than anything else. It's not like women want their children to be this way or that way, or want anybody to treat their daughters poorly. But it's social conditioning, you know, they tell you accept this, accept that. Sometimes it just feels like all the girls, everybody, women, everybody, you go through the same class, let me put it like that, where they just say, oh, if your husband does this, you know, just keep quiet, it's okay. Don't tell anybody, keep it to yourself. Just pray to God, just pray. You know, all sorts, go to the war room. It's social conditioning, you know. In church, it's the same. So that's what it is, more than anything else.
Are we saying things like that, go to the war room, pray, work at it, is wrong, Dr. Kemi?
Not at all. Not at all. There is a big part of our lives that respond to our spirituality, to our faith, and for a good reason. And we certainly won't stamp it out. But, and that's where the but comes in, you have to recognize that gender-based violence and violence against women and girls cannot be prayed away. You need a tangible roadmap. You need organizations like WARIF. You need your government. You need each and every one of us to recognize that it's wrong and play our own parts, and then go to the war room and then pray about it.
Somebody just sent in the comments, so what about the inclusion of disabled people who can't help themselves?
Absolutely, absolutely. When we talk about social advocacy, as I said, it's any group that's discriminated against. And that covers, you know, disabilities, covers race, covers color.
Do you find that, I'm just wondering though, Brenda, do you find that people with disabilities are also preyed upon? Females with disabilities?
I mean, it's horrid. It's not just, it's horrid. And Dr. K can give you the statistics, because I know she has seen survivors, disabled survivors. It's horrible. I think they're the worst demography. They're the worst, because now we don't even have anybody articulating it for them, especially for people who are voiceless, who are mute, you know, or people who can't speak. So it's horrible. You find that their caregivers, you know, are guilty of abusing them. It's the worst. It's the worst. They can't even fight. They can't say anything.
I think this takes me to biology, and I'm going to go back to Dr. Kemi. On one of the editions of the show, one man said one of the problems is the growing availability of pornography. And some people often say that men can't help themselves because when they get turned on, they just need to do something about it. Is it that, or we are just, I see Brenda goes, you know, what is it?
Well,
what is it about biology? I don't know.
I'm glad Brenda's raising her eyes, because the truth is, when I assume I have to pick my words carefully here because of the nature of this conversation. When a man is stimulated, enough to about to embark on a sexual encounter, it's a physiological response, yes. He gets excited from his brain by a visual picture, and therefore that sends messages so that he then becomes excited and he becomes stimulated. However, all of that occurs in human beings. And I use that as the caveat because we're an evolved species. We have the fundamental choice of stopping our actions as and when we choose. So if you say to me that he can't help himself, then I would say to you that then perhaps he's not evolved, because only those that are not evolved do not have that choice and free will to stop a physiological reaction.
That's straight to the point. You have not evolved. Because I always wonder, but is it fact that there's enough pornography? So we can't blame pornography. We should blame the response to pornography. Brenda, what do you think?
You should blame. You see, this is what I say. Tell people all the time. Look, this same man who has done this horrible thing probably has a job, probably has a family, has responsibilities, and he's not stupid at those places. He doesn't walk around the street with his fly open and his organs outside. He has some sense. So why can't he apply it? He should. I'm always like, nobody should tell me that excuse. He can't help himself. He watched this, he saw that. She was wearing this skirt, she was wearing that. It's a lie. It's a lie from the pit of hell. They should stop. In fact, that narrative should end because he walked. He used his legs and he walked. His brain is complete. He has his senses. He can eat, he can talk. So whatever it is that gives him the control over everything else that he does applies to his physiology, applies to his feeling aroused and his feelings of desires and all of that. So it's an excuse.
But
I would add though that when we look at it through the lens of that young boy, that adolescent boy, that boy that's going through that pubertal phase of, trying to navigate, feelings, and of course, trying to navigate sexual feelings. Yes, pornography does play a part. When you are at that age where you're not quite sure the right way to behave with the opposite sex, when you're not quite sure what's socially acceptable or not, if you are desensitized by imagery that just shows, violent exchanges of a sexual nature without anything else, and nobody is there again to help you navigate what is right and what is wrong in terms of one's behavior.
What does that mean, though? Brenda, are you there?
Yes.
Brenda, can you hear me?
Yes.
So you will see that there is an impact in terms of the pornography, the images that he subjects himself to, and the fact that there's an increased risk of him now being a potential perpetrator.
Okay, I mean, that's right. I dropped off for a bit there, but I think I kind of get what you're saying about the fact that it means we need to educate our boys to be more responsible. That's key. And how about how we respond to those cases within the family, where you have things like, oh, we keep it down. How do parents navigate those kind of experiences within their own family? Dr. Kemi, you go first.
You have to understand that you cannot allow a survivor, especially a young girl, to carry the weight of her abuse because the perpetrator happens to be a family member. You cannot do that. You cannot begin to harm her in such a horrible way. First, you invalidate what happened to her. Then you force her to be silent. You prevent her from getting medical care. You prevent her from getting counseling, all because the perpetrator happens to be a family member? No, cannot be done, should not be done.
Before I take this observation by Dakore Ekpendi, who says a lot of people attribute this sense of violence to a spiritual attack, I would like Brenda to respond. You had a mother when all of this happened. Did you discuss it with her? And how did your mother handle it? How did your parents handle it?
So no.
What can we learn from it?
I didn't tell my mom. In fact, I told my mom when I turned 35, which was a few years ago, quite a while. And I feel like she didn't have all the capacity to handle it, to understand it, and it actually caused a breakdown. in the family for a while. You know, at that age, when I eventually, you know, started saying all the things that had gone on, and
well, the
it was
perpetrators,
difficult.
family members.
Oh, it was not. It was a staff. It was household staff. It was household staff that abused me at 7. You know, but at 18 and at 22, it was when I was in school. You know, but the one that was pertinent at the time was to tell her, look, this happened to me when I was 7, and you know, God bless her. She didn't have the capacity. That's what from what I can see, she didn't have the capacity to handle it. She couldn't handle it. And for a while, I wasn't speaking to anybody. I wasn't talking to anybody. And then eventually, you know, with all the counseling I was getting and all the help, I realized that, look, I can't put the blame on anybody else, okay? This guy did something wrong. He did something bad. And I just have to find a way to make peace with my own family, you know, about it. But I never told anybody. In fact, it's only one incident I told my roommate, you know, at the time. And of course, she was 18 like me too. What would she do? She didn't know anything. I didn't know anything, you know. So I didn't get any counseling. I just put it away, sort of. I put it away.
So, I mean, that's a very good place to take a break. I need to see some of the pictures of some of the work that WARIF has done. And I know WARIF, I mean, it's purely, I mean, non-governmental funding from your pockets and pockets of friends and well-wishers. And you've achieved quite a lot, because you found that, you told us that a receptacle of data. But I need to see some of the pictures. Are you ready, technical, to show us some of the pictures of some of Dr. Kemi's work before I go back to the issue of talking about it? What should be the first thing people who are abused should do, and how should family members respond to it? Because I kind of like almost understand when a girl doesn't even know how to tell her mother that it's happened to it. So please, can you please place those pictures before we come back to Dr. Ibru in the house? Thank you. Very quickly. First off, I'd like to say, Dr. K, your colors are so attractive.
Oh, thank
Teal
you.
and pink. Was that on purpose? I love those colors.
Yes,
It's so hopeful.
Very deliberate. Teal is actually the color, the ribbon color for sexual assault. It's a global recognized color. And then the plum that we decided to use was just to show the vibrancy of the work that we're doing in that space.
Mm-hmm. Because I know you personally, I know you're a stickler for everything gotta work right. If you know Dr. K, am I correct, Brenda?
Yes.
She lives what she preaches. I mean, I don't know how your family lends you to this work. I mean, they lent you to the work anyway. So I was going to, somebody said something earlier about this whole violent attack thing, that, oh, it's a function of some spiritual demons that are making men do the things that they do, and boys, and they take it to church. I want you to address that, Kemi, as well as the issue of who should be the first person you tell, and how should we handle it? Your daughter comes up to you and says, hey, I've been abused. What should you do?
Well, first of all, the issue of it being a spiritual attack is not one that I hold any sway at all in whatsoever. I believe that we are all given discernment of right and wrong, and we're all given the ability to make those decisions with free will. So if you decide that you're going to violently rape a 2-year-old, which is the youngest that I have had to treat, or a 68-year-old who was brought into my facility, then this was a choice that you made. So no, I'm sorry. Spiritual attacks, the devil made me do it, I was under the influence, none of those excuses one should find verifiable or valid. The reason why women and children are repetitively abused in homes is because the home front keeps silent about it. The reasons why children can't speak to their family members about abuse is because the environment is not enabling. So we need to pay attention to our children. You don't bring up your child to come to you and say, Mommy, Uncle Femi is raping me. So your child does not have the ability to do so. But when you say to your child, go say hello to Uncle Femi, and your child instinctively draws back, that's your cue for you to pay attention. When your child starts exhibiting signs that you didn't ordinarily have or notice, you had an A-star child, your child is coming home with E's and D's and F's. You had a child that was perfectly happy, your child is suddenly withdrawn. You had a child that once upon a time would sit at the table and have conversation with you from morning, noon to night, so much so that you'd say, oh, please leave me alone. Your child doesn't want to engage you any longer. You have a child that suddenly becomes very sexually promiscuous, suddenly starts asking questions, or suddenly starts acting out. You have a child that silently sits at home and then starts self-harming. You have a child that wets the bed and never used to do that because the child is now, say, 10, and that stopped when the child was 2. Those are all signs, and these are signs that we need to pay attention to. So probably that scenario of the child coming to you and sharing with you can happen if the environment is enabling.
And if it does.
Yes, and if that child does, then you have to believe the child. For a child to come to you and give you that sacred oath of trust, you must act immediately. And by acting immediately, you must protect that child. And you must protect that woman. As a friend, if your friend is in a situation, it's a little different. We're dealing with a consenting adult. And you're dealing with an adult where it is not your place to now determine how and where and what she should do.
Tell her story, yeah.
At that point in time, your role is different. You're no longer the custodian or the guardian of a minor. You're now a friend that has to be that active listener and supporter. This is that friend that you know that she needs to leave and you advise her to, but not just with words and prayers. You advise her with tangible, practical advice. How does she get money? Where does she go? Who will protect her? Has she gone to the police? And you wait for her to make the decision. You cannot make that decision for her, no matter how difficult it is, because we all want to take over. We want to jump straight in. We want to save her. And we get frustrated sometimes, especially if she goes back, because narrative will tell you again and again she will go back. But if you're truly a friend, you have to be patient, you have to be supportive, you have to be there for her each and every time.
Now you're talking specifically about situations of close, like marriage and things like that. So I'm wondering, Brenda, though, because we have just about a few minutes to go on the show, I'm wondering what it is like, to heal, possibly, does healing ever come?
I don't know. I can't tell you that, oh yes. I mean, for me, I can only just explain my feelings, So for a very long time, I carried around a lot of guilt, inexplicably, since I was a child. Like, I was just a bad, dirty person. I was bad and I was dirty. But I didn't understand why. And even when I would err and my mom would punish me, somewhere at the back of my head, I'll be like, I'm deserving. I'm a bad person. I'm a dirty person. I'm bad. I deserve all this punishment. I deserve all this. And when something bad will happen, I'll say, yes, I deserve it. I'm a bad person. And even when I became like an adult and I was having relationships and I was dating, and a guy would want to date me and I'd be like, I'm a bad girl. There was nothing. Okay, you're a bad girl. What did you do? What are you doing that you're a bad girl? What did you do? I wasn't drinking alcohol. I wasn't smoking. So what is the bad girl? Why are you a bad girl? What is the bad girl? But I just used to say it all the time. I used to say it all the time that I'm a bad girl. I'm a bad girl. So there was this sense of guilt, this sense of, so all that, I think those feelings have eased off. They've eased off.
And why?
So I started having several conversations with Dr. Kemi. We were having conversations. I mean, she was counseling me when she didn't know she was counseling me.
So what we're saying, at the end of the day, therapy seems to be one of the ways on the journey to healing.
It is. It's a very important way. I don't think that there's another way. It might not be the conventional, I'm going to see a therapist. It might not be that convention, but you do need some form of psychotherapy. You need it because you need questions answered. You want to understand why this happened to you. And if somebody tells you long enough and you have trust in what that person is saying, it starts to make sense. You start to understand it, and because she's qualified and she's seen it so much, she can say, look, you're not alone. There are other people, this has happened to this has happened like this, and this is what we did, and this is what you can do, this is a suggestion, this is an idea. I mean, let me just give you a quick example. Remember the video you were talking about? The video you said you saw? I remember when that video wanted to come out, and she called me, she told me, oh, the video is coming out soon. No, she was giving me notice. And I was like, okay, no problem. And then I think the day or the day before, I just had this sense of shame. It was unbelievable. I hid under my bed. And I called her and I said, is it possible for them not to just put my name when the video comes out? I'm happy for the video to come out. They shouldn't just put my name, And she was like, if you want the video to come out, we can let it go. But I just want you to know. And then she went into this thing and she spoke to me. And I can't tell you that was one of the why I will forever be grateful. I came out from under that bed. I was under the bed. I came out as she was talking to me. I came out from under that bed, and it was like, a cloud was lifting, a weight was lifting off of me. And she was just telling me about how wonderful I am, what I've done, what I've achieved, how it's not my fault, everything again. It's not like she's not told me this before. You understand? It's not like she's told me before.
So the thing is, it's work in progress. It's a lot of work for advocacy groups like WARIF. But again, I think for Dr. Kemi, because it's also a professional thing and it's a personal passion, that's why it goes even deeper. I'd like you guys to please tell me what's the most important information that you think anybody should go away with today as we tell and encourage people to stay with her, to support every single female out there, young and old, to protect them against all forms of violence. So I'll go first with you, Dr. Kemi, and then I'll go to Brenda before we call it a night today.
Thank you. I think the first important information I would like to leave, and I'm not sure if it's something that can be put up, is our 24-hour confidential helpline. This is a number.
Just call out the number. Call out the number for us.
0809 210-0009. I'll repeat that. 0809 210-0009. This is a 24-hour confidential helpline. It is free. It is manned by qualified counselors. To all survivors, if you have questions, if you want the anonymity of not even discussing who you are and how it transpired, just call. There is always somebody at the end of that phone. The second piece of information that I would like to leave is to each and every one of us. We have to believe survivors. I know that there is a small percentage of a false rape claim, and there's always that one person that was cited. There are only 2 to 5% worldwide. Women do not come forward carrying the shame that community has placed on her, her family has placed on her, because she is lying. Please believe her. And then it's our collective responsibility to do more. This conversation started here, albeit I joined late, apologies, but we need to continue it. Continue it after this program in our different spheres of influence. We all have spheres of influence. Let's be that good bystander and bring it up and continue the conversation. Thank you.
Brenda?
To anybody who doesn't know what to do, who thinks something has happened, I can only say one thing to you: don't be afraid. Don't be afraid. You understand? Don't be afraid. Use this phone number that she's put up now. Use the phone number. Don't be afraid. Even if you can't tell anybody around you, don't be afraid. Call this confidential line. It's a stranger. You don't know the person doesn't know you. You know, don't be afraid. Just come forward and say the truth. Tell us what happened, you know, so that you can start getting the help that you need. When you break the silence, you break the cycle. Remember that. When you break the silence, you break the cycle. Remember.
Thank you so much, ladies. I can spend 5 hours talking to both of you. And I'm just hoping that even if it's only 2 people that see it, if 2 people tell 2 people that tell 2 people that tell 2 people, and a ripple is created, and we'll be saving, even if it's 1 girl's life. Please let all of us aim to save that girl child by not blaming her, by criminalizing rape, and by giving help when they call out for help. And for all those who find themselves in those situations, it's not your fault. Seek help. Thank you very much. I will round up as I'm going away. I just play the pledge and I'll say bye. So stay back in my studio and we'll chat. But if we just want to play a pledge that children will report to their parents and parents will believe their children. Thank you so much for being with us. And I appreciate both of you so much. Mwah.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you so much.
I pledge to always talk to my parents and other trusted adults about anything that makes me feel sad, angry, afraid, or worried. I pledge to say no if someone asks to see or touch my private parts. I pledge to respect and care for other children as I like to be respected and cared for. I pledge to report, speak out, and get help from my parents or a trusted adult when anyone hurts me. So help me God. I pledge to learn about types, signs, and prevention of violence against children. I pledge to speak out and report all cases of violence against children to the appropriate authorities. I pledge to step in and help any child experiencing violence. I pledge to consciously create an environment free from violence for my child. I pledge to communicate effectively and spend quality time with my children and build a trustworthy relationship with them. So help me God.